Okay, it is now 7 p.m. Thank you all for being here. We have a large group on. I believe we got all of our board members. Laura, I don't see you. Are you there, Laura?
I am.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, I will now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. 7 p.m. Thank you all for being here. We have a large group on. Oh, I don't know why I'm hearing my own voice, but we'll try that again. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:01 p.m. We are following our own district policy. We are by meeting virtually tonight because some of our board members are temporarily quarantined. So we are proceeding with the meeting tonight under the Open Meetings Act exception related to the governor's disaster declaration. This is temporary. We expect to reconvene in person at our next board meeting on Tuesday, November 24th. I will have the coordinator call the roll.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 6 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would like to remind everyone that we are starting each board meeting with a reminder about our mission. The mission of Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in a first-class education for a changing world. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank Connor, who always is working behind the scenes to produce our board meetings for Comcast Channel 20, YouTube, and other media outlets, so that we are available for the public to view our board meetings. The public hearing for e-learning has been pulled, and that will be moved to the 24th of November. So we will go ahead now and start with our petitions and communications portion of our agenda, when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communications portion of our agenda. According to our board policy 2.230, the public comments portion of the meeting is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you will be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow sufficient time for the board and to conduct our meetings in an efficient and effective manner, we are requesting that you comply with the guidelines that are posted, and each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. I will call one name at a time, because we normally do two when we're in person, but we'll do one at a time to keep it clean for our Zoom. We will have I think, a digital clock to help you with your 2 minutes. I think Connor handles that. And we thank you for your interest and your cooperation with our guidelines. Again, thank you all for being here. And our first speaker tonight is Mel Gillifen. Mel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mel Gillifen, REA President, 27-year teaching veteran. Good evening, board. I first want to say I hope everyone's health is fine and that your families are all safe at home. We started our back to school talks this summer when the positivity rate was in the 3% range. The big number of 8% has come and gone long ago. We stood here just 2 weeks ago in front of the board at 15.5% and asked, when is enough enough? Well, I'm back again tonight, and we sit at 18.5%, up 3% since our last visit. I talk to our county health administrator regularly. Matter of fact, she will attend and speak at our AR council next week. I also talk to our school nurses several times a week. And to say we have a 0% spread rate in our schools is just not fair. We all reside in Region 1. Most of us live right here in this community where we are all under attack from this awful virus. We want our people to be safe. This is not the time to take chances with the health and staff or students. Many of our schools are barely functioning. One school had over 100 classes that need to be covered this week. We have students housed in cafeterias and libraries, watched by an assistant principal or a para. With large numbers of teachers quarantined and out of the buildings, we have a staffing crisis on our hands. I'm back once again with this question. When is enough enough? Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Our second speaker for tonight is Amanda McAllister. Amanda, are you there?
I am. Thank you. I am Amanda McAllister, and I want to speak with you tonight in addition to my email last night to emphasize the importance of the topic. This is my 13th year being an educator in RPS and my 3rd year being an RPS parent. This year I'm serving in the capacity of an intervention specialist. As a context student, I'm reminded multiple times a day that while education is incredibly important, it goes on the back burner when faced with tragedy. Local hospitals are nearing capacity, and ICU beds are becoming scarce. We aren't allowed to gather in groups larger than 10, except, of course, to attend school. Our community is being hit incredibly hard by this pandemic, as now 203 individuals in Winnebago alone have died from this virus. The target rate set by the state for active cases per population is less than 50 per 100,000. According to the COVID statistics shared by district administration at 6 p.m. tonight, we are at 6 times that rate in RPS. Our county positivity rate is 18.5%, remarkably higher than the safety limit that had been previously established. 228 more people were diagnosed today with COVID following our community survival rate. That means at least 6 of those people are facing their final battle and will die. According to Illinois Department of Health, 17.5% of exposures in the region have happened at schools. That means of those 228 people that were diagnosed today, 40 were exposed at school and therefore were preventable.
Thank you, Amanda.
Statistically, one of those 40 will die, which once again have been prevented. Schools are not buildings. Schools are people.
Amanda, I'm sorry, your time has expired.
Do everything within their power to support the students that they serve. Schools can do that in a remote manner while protecting the staff and the students. I ask the board and the cabinet to do their part and to stop blindlessly following advice that doesn't add up. Look at the facts, follow logic and common sense, and save your schools by protecting its people.
Thank you.
Must switch to district-wide remote learning.
I'm sorry, I don't think she can hear me. So our third speaker is Eric Scherzwin. I can see you, so I think you are there. So if you'll unmute, you can go ahead.
Hi.
Thank you for being here, Eric.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Eric Serwin. I am let me get to the top of my thing here. I'm a parent to 2 RPS students, and I'm a teacher at Guilford High School. This is my 10th year at Guilford and my 16th year teaching. I'm speaking to you from my classroom, where I've been for 12, now going on 13 hours today because I can't work from home. Never in my 16 years have I ever seen a teaching staff so utterly demoralized and burnt out. In the past 10 years at Guilford, I've come to see the Viking staff as family, as a crew of colleagues rowing this ship to some distant shore. But never in the past 10 years have I seen so many colleagues so run down. My staff, my team, my family of Vikings are putting in double the time, twice the effort with triple the stress, and we've been doing it for months. For many of us, we've been going nonstop since last year, starting with the tech outage through the COVID spring and into today. And frankly, we're drowning. We're creating lessons from scratch. Grading student work takes twice as long. Reaching students is twice as hard, and we only see them half the time. Taking attendance used to be something that we could do in seconds, and now we spend 30 to 40 minutes a day tracking which student was present in which format. Our Viking staff is taking on substitute duties for rooms emptied of their teachers and students. We're running ourselves into the ground in service to the community, and there's no end in sight. We came back to school with clear indicators that we would be safe, and that we were told that when schools became unsafe, that the board would adjust the plan to keep us safe. That has proven to be false. When we heard Dr. Jarrett tell us that we shouldn't have to pour from an empty cup, we believed him. Our cups were empty then, and they're still empty now. Our staff is at the end of very frayed ropes, and we cannot sustain this any longer. I'm not here to ask when enough will be enough. I'm here to tell you that enough was a month ago. More than enough was 2 weeks ago. Our teachers and staff simply cannot continue putting their lives, their health, and their safety at risk for this district. Something has to give now.
Thank you, Eric. Our next speaker, I just have your first name as Danny. I do not have a last name. Are you on?
Yes, it's Danny Perrotte.
Okay, I see you now. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening. My name is Danny Perrotte. I am a teacher at Roosevelt High School and a parent of a 7th grader at Eisenhower Middle School. I am here tonight as a voice for all of our teachers and staff. We can no longer stand by and watch as the numbers of positive COVID-19 cases rise throughout the community. We feel that the Board of Education and Dr. Jarrett are not responding in a way that is making the teachers and staff feel safe in our schools. At the board meeting held on August 11th, 2020, David Siegel spoke and said, "Whatever decision is made about the return of school, there will be dire risks for students and staff." Dire risks, not just some risks, but dire risks about returning to school, and that is what we're seeing. At the August 18th, 2020 Rockford Education Association meeting, the president and vice president of REA reported, per the AR council notes, that the threshold when the school district would close is when the community has 3 days with 8% or more cases of COVID. Excuse me, that is greater than 50 per 100,000. Per the Winnebago Health Department website, the number of COVID cases are now up to 18.5%. That is 2.3 times higher than what was told to us at the beginning of the year. I am going to leave out some of this so that I can make sure I get through all of it, because I have talked to numbers of teachers from the following schools, and they have shared information with me. For the number of teachers that are currently out, we understand that some may have taken a personal day, a mental health day, or a sick day, and those numbers may be slightly off. However, this is what we are seeing in our buildings every day. And I see that I only have 10 seconds left, but I have 23 schools that have more than one classroom that has been put on quarantine. Aramark is down to 22 employees due to COVID. We have at Roosevelt a room that is closed. We're just feeling neglected, school board, and it's getting very frustrating. And we want our voices to be heard.
Thank you, Danny. Our next speaker is Tia Lojanica. Are you on?
Yeah, if you could give me 1 second to find the timer again. My power is out, so I have to flip around on my phone.
Alrighty.
Sorry about that. The storm
no
hit
problem.
me hard.
No problem.
All right. It looks like okay, thank you. Thank you for the time to speak. I'm a staff member who learned she tested positive for COVID-19 yesterday, and I truly believe I was infected at work. My school nurse came and physically measured the space between the desks in my classroom to ensure I was safe using district guidelines. Even when using the district precautions and being outside the 6 feet zone, I contracted coronavirus. I took the precaution of getting tested even after being told I was outside of the zone of exposure because I'm truly afraid of the disease that has stopped the world. It's clear that even under the most carefully followed medical protocols, coronavirus is still spreading in my classroom. I've not eaten inside a restaurant since March 13th. In fact, I ate outside in 35-degree weather in Wisconsin because I don't eat inside of restaurants anymore. From March until today, I can count on one hand how many friends' houses I have visited. This includes the summer. I wear my mask diligently when grocery shopping and choose to support businesses by ordering out and eating outside. I use hand sanitizer before and after pumping at gas stations and paying in stores. I don't eat with coworkers at school. I don't sit in classrooms with my masks off. I sanitize my hands after touching doorknobs. And I even advocated for student desks to be cleaned more than once a week. I'm one of the people who take all of the precautions and go even further than the precautions by getting tested voluntarily, and I still got sick. I could have infected countless of students and colleagues and probably would have if I didn't voluntarily take that test. And my symptoms didn't even align with coronavirus, and I still got sick. The district master's program went remote, and we have stayed remote since March, even though we have less than 20 members. Today's rates showed that 1 in 5 people who got tested positively. Rockton's location ran out of tests. UIC's location spilled onto the road. The question again is, what is enough enough? My students are suffering because I don't know what I'm doing on the daily basis because I don't know if I can teach from home, if I'm going to be sick, or if I can actually teach them. They see their teachers and their classmates disappearing because of quarantining. It's not safe for our students. It's not safe for me. It's truly time to go remote.
Thank you, Tia. Our next speaker is Weston Braybeck.
Yep, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Great. Good evening. I am also here from my classroom tonight. So earlier today, there was an email that was sent explaining that due to multiple members of the board being quarantined, that they were going to be meeting virtually today. That is understandable given the fact that COVID rates are so high. But what I still don't understand is when multiple students in a class go to quarantine, the students and the teachers are still yet required to be in person in that same room that had all of those students being quarantined. Staff are getting frustrated and students are getting frustrated because of this double standard that is now happening and that has been happening. If the board doesn't feel safe when some of them are quarantined, then why is it safe for students and staff to be in person still learning? I encourage you all the board members, to actually come to my class and spend a day in my shoes, shadow my classroom and spend time with the 58 students that I have left in my classroom and the dozens that I see walking around in the hallways. To be with me during the time where I have to remind 5 times each class period or passing period to tell a student to wear their mask properly. And for me to go up to a student, one of my other 58 students that I actually see in my class, going close to them to be able to show them how to succeed and how to learn in my class. If any of this hesitation to accept my invitation, if there is any invitation from, any hesitation to accept my invite is a direct indication and reflection that in-person learning should not be happening. For the safety of our students and our staff, we should be full remote teaching now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Chrissy Perry. Are you on, Chrissy?
I'm on. Hi, okay. How are you? Hey, dear board members, my name is Chrissy Perry, and I have been an educator for 10 years. Today, I want to speak about the experiences of teaching a hybrid model at the high school level. Board members, you hold a very important position, one that impacts the education of many students. And I know you want what is best for students because you wouldn't be volunteering your time otherwise. From my personal experience in the classroom and conversations with fellow teachers, we are not seeing this hybrid model being what is best for students to succeed in a post-pandemic world. We keep trying to fit a traditional learning model into a non-traditional atmosphere and expect humans to feel success and not the feeling of treading water. Students need consistency to thrive, and the current model is full of irregularities that do not create routines for our students. In-person students are not going to bed on time knowing they have school tomorrow. They are not retaining material for active class participation. And finally, due to the fact that they have to wear masks and anxiety over current affairs, they are not engaging in the classroom environment as well. Should our focus be on one style of teaching, we could create a stronger virtual program that allows for small group online discussions and one-on-one conversation to work on areas of improvement or enrichment and provide better feedback for that. Having time to plan with colleagues during the school day, not just in our PLC, but also with other content areas in order to simplify big ideas students should walk away from. And most importantly, ways to lessen the amount of screen time on computers, which studies show affects brain development. Our students are spending 5 to 7 hours on a computer every day just for our learning. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate for my own children. We have created this model and split our focus for 1/3 of our students and created a system that takes away from the betterment for all our students.
Thank you, Christy. Our final speaker tonight is Tanya Patarek. Are you on?
Yeah, my name is Madame Senora on the screen. Okay. I'm the one with the background. Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for the volunteerism that you provide as a service to the community. I would just like to, if you haven't seen it, I'm not trying to be funny. If I'm teaching, which I am, this is a number that I want us to really, really think about. There are people in some people's families, including my own, that are induced comas in the hospital that are clinging on to the edge of their life. I don't want to say it can be avoided, but I'm going to. I feel very strongly that this can be avoided. We need this number to go down. Safety first. How can we protect this community? I have children, I'm an educator, and I'm here to tell you that no, I don't want to go full-time remote, but we have to go full-time remote. Mental health is at stake, but even more importantly, lives are at stake. I am speaking off the cuff. With no disrespect to anyone else, I have not prepared remarks tonight. This number should speak for itself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate your interest and appreciate your cooperation with following our guidelines. At this time, I would like to ask if there are any board member comments, and I would just like to share my excitement in the news that was discussed today regarding the Rockford Promise. For me as a board member, I want to thank 3 people that I know that have been working very hard on this, and that would be Dr. Matt Vosberg, who started the idea of the Kalamazoo Promise coming to Rockford. That was the first time I had ever heard of it. So Matt, I thank you for having that discussion with the board probably 7-8 years ago or something like that. Elaine Breck, who was the leader of the Rockford Promise for many, many years. And Susan Fumo, who has been, as you all know, an employee of the school district and been very involved in the Rockford Promise. But today, the announcement that we are kicking off a game changer for the city of Rockford and RPS students who, if they meet certain criteria, which are attend 4 years of high school, graduate with a 3.0 grade point average or higher, that they can attend NIU tuition free. And I also want a big shout out to our mayor, who also helped greatly with creating the opportunities for funding for that to happen. So thank you to all the people that have been involved in Rockford Promise for the many years that and this is just a great game changer today for the students of Rockford Public Schools who want to go on to college and maybe didn't have the means for it. So are there other board member comments at this time?
And this is Jude.
Go ahead, Jude.
Somebody would check the chat room. There are some people who apparently signed up to speak, and we didn't use 30 minutes and they didn't have their time. So does anybody have any idea what kind of glitch we had with that, and can we correct that and give them an opportunity?
Laura, did you see any names in the chat room on your end? Is there anyone on right now that would like to have 2 minutes?
Yes, there is a Claudia Marshall that would like to speak, and I believe a Julie Kidder, if I'm saying her name correctly.
All right. Go ahead, Claudia. We'll let you go next. And if someone can help me with the timer that I can watch the 2 minute. Go ahead, Claudia.
Thank you. Good evening, board members and public participants. Given current world conditions, I'd like you to imagine the following scenario. Imagine a world where a pandemic hits and communities decide how best to educate their children and move forward. Imagine a health department that gives minimal organization to teaching during a highly contagious disease outbreak. Imagine 2,000 teachers having safety concerns with the given health department plan and absence of its follow-through. Employees are put into this concerning health scare and share those concerns with the health department anonymously. That communication isn't anonymous, and the head of the health department, who created the core plan, states she feels there are unstable teachers in the classroom and aggressively goes after those who expressed their safety concerns that affect hundreds and thousands of people. We don't have to imagine that the head of the health department blamed the teachers for the outbreak for not taking proper precautions, because she did blame us. Now let's turn that imagination of yours, shall we? Imagine one of the top schools in testing and performance in the district having 10 teachers out on an in-person teaching day due to COVID complications from infection and exposure. Imagine that school having 2 more teachers out for other health concerns and appointments. Imagine, if you will, in this scenario, that there are 50 classrooms uncovered. Imagine a teacher in that school having 37 in-person students drop to 23 because of safety issues. Imagine that the only way to fill those vacancies is to have teachers who aren't infected or quarantined cover during their prep time. Imagine all that doesn't get accomplished for those teachers' own classes when they don't have the time to adequately prepare. You all don't need to imagine what it's like to leave those incomplete things in your own life, whether it's work or family related. Now, imagine what it means to leave all those things incomplete when we're talking about educating our students. Imagine a school board that gets to choose their meeting remotely due to safety concerns with the pandemic, and all the others involved in the district have no option to do that. Now, please take that imagery and place it in current times. This is the current reality. Students aren't safe, nor are their teachers. Please consider going remote for the safety of all involved, so that we may move forward with the best teaching possible in the worst teaching time I have seen in all of my 26 years in the Rockford Public Schools.
Thank you, Claudia. Julie Kidder, you want to go next?
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Julie Kidder. I'm a 20-year veteran RPS teacher. I'm a special education resource teacher at Spring Creek Elementary School. My purpose tonight is to inform you of what is really going on in the RPS schools in relation to COVID-19. I just returned to work today after being at home for 12 days after a positive COVID diagnosis. I started symptoms October 28th, was tested October 29th, and did not get my positive results until November 3rd. Since school was not in session November 3rd, the contact tracers were not able to talk to me and quarantine my contacts until November 4th, 1 week after my onset of symptoms. That gave the opportunity for all of my contacts to expose others as well. Since October 28th, myself and 10 other teachers in my building have tested positive. 2 others have tests pending, 6 other staff members are quarantined, and 3 classroom classrooms are quarantined. Of the 11 teachers with positive cases at Spring Creek, 9 of them were classroom teachers. This virus has spread through our building at an alarming rate. With numbers at these levels, as you can imagine, it has caused a tremendous hardship on everyone in our building. For example, there's a lack of substitute teachers. Therefore, for the past 2 weeks, specialists were being used as substitutes for teachers, and our students have gone without fine arts and physical education. Having a lack of staff has made it almost impossible to do a competent job. We are simply filling the spots. Our principal has done an amazing job of filling these spots, but our building is undoubtedly in survival mode. Morale is down, stress levels and paranoia are up. The remaining staff in our building can't help but wonder, am I going to be the next one to get COVID? I was one of the lucky ones. I was sick, but I had very mild symptoms. I cannot say the same for my colleagues, one of whom was admitted to the hospital yesterday and is expected to be there for at least a week. It is very hard to see your work family go down with you and others left to pick up the pieces. We are concerned for the safety of everyone in our schools. I think it is important for you to have a clear picture of what teachers are dealing with during this crisis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, I will go back now to board member comments. Are there board members who have comments? Okay. We will then move on to our next item, which is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett.
Thank you, Mr. Scribano. I wanted to continue on our conversation about the historic announcement today with expanding our partnership with Rock Valley College and Rockford University to Northern Illinois University. And thank you for doing such a great job of already acknowledging the fantastic work of the Rockford Promise Board, of Matt Bosberg and Susan Fumo. I do want to also acknowledge the great partnership of Northern Illinois University. Part of the reason that this opportunity is possible is because Northern Illinois University is offering their tuition reduced from about $14,000 down to a maximum cost to the promise of $6,000. So great partnership there, and also free for students that are making less than $75,000 a year as a family. So very, very, very exciting. But I do want to talk to the board a little bit about what the Rockford Public Schools are going to aspire to be doing as part of our work. 469 students currently have a 3.0 grade point average. And it is our aspiration to see a significantly increasing number of students qualify for this. So that's going to involve an all-in effort. Faculty, staff across the board, and community working together to help all of our students make progress, whether it's attending Rock Valley and Rockford University, which we've done in the past, or taking part of this new opportunity with Northern Illinois University. We also have made significant progress with it offering advanced placement and dual credit offerings, which helps decrease the cost for students and also increases their readiness. We have committed to continue with that early college work to enhance those opportunities for our students. And finally, we plan to commit to come up with opportunities to offer content area master's degree certifications for teachers at the high school level, so that we can offer some additional dual credit in regular content area classes by building some kind of extra partnerships there. So those are all aspirational goals. Those are things that I plan to report to the board and to the city on our progress, and you'll be seeing our version of the IGA is going to be coming forward at a future board meeting. Our internal counsel has been working with the city and also Northern Illinois University on this really unique IGA. And finally, just a continued commitment for fundraising, so that not only can we support the RPS students at Northern Illinois University, but also that we can support students with aspirations to attend Rockford University, Rock Valley, and who knows, maybe down the road we'll even be able to find other partners as well. But really proud of the work that was started many, many years ago, probably almost 10 years ago in this district, and it's nice to see that come together. I know that is not foremost on the minds of our teachers this evening that are really focused on some other issues, but I do think that this is an important opportunity to share this with the board and the community and to prepare you for the upcoming prepare you for the upcoming IGA and future community discussion. Just as a side note, Mrs. Fumo let me know that within 6 hours of this being posted, 6 students had already applied for the scholarship. It's not even officially approved by City Hall, and we already have students waiting in line. I do think this is going to matter in the lives of our students, and really, really excited to have played a small role in this, and appreciative for the board's continued support as we pursue this issue over many, many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrett, and I will just say it's been a pleasure for me as a board member to attend every one of those Rockford Promise scholarship presentations. It's just so exciting to see the student and their family get financial assistance to attend one of those schools like Rock Valley or NIU or Rockford University. So we are now on to the Performance Monitoring Committee items. So the report and action items that proceeded through our Performance Monitoring Committee. I'm on 6A, board members, if you're looking at your agenda. The first item is fiscal year 20 audited financial statements that was presented by Baker Tilly and our finance department. Is there a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 20 audited financial statements?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Are there any questions or discussions? Hearing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the audited financial statements for 2020.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Next item is item 6B, which is board policy 4.60 operations, services, purchases, and contracts revision. Is there a motion and a second to approve this policy revision?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the policy 4.60 revisions.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Our next item is 6C, which is board policy 5.180 for personnel temporary illness or temporary incapacity. Is there a motion and a second to approve the revisions to board policy 5.180?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any comments, questions, or discussion? Hearing none, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the revisions to board policy 5.180.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mrs. McCulloch. I'm going to turn the next item over to you as the lead for the discussion on the metrics regarding multi-classroom leaders, instructional coaches, and curriculum implementation leaders for any other items that you wish to follow up on from the committee as a whole. Mrs. McCulloch.
So we had some outstanding questions and didn't really have a good opportunity for conversation about the 3 items that we're going to talk about now and how we're hoping that they improve student achievement. The annual reviews that we're going to see, the Plan, Do, Study, Acts, one of the questions we need to be asking ourselves is, are these what is it? We're always about return on investment, but what is it we're looking for? What metric are we measuring? And are they working based on our ability to see outcomes that the metrics have put in place, and are we actually measuring the right metrics when we're doing this? So you've all had the annual review forms, I realized, for the last week, but I did ask if Matt Vosberg will, I think you're going to do the CILs, and the multi-classroom leaders would be Matt Zediger, and I believe Heidi Detman will do the, I'm not sure, Heidi, if you're doing the curriculum implementation leaders or if Matt is. So how about we start with, and what they're going to do is review and talk about the metrics and where we're at and moving forward so that we all have a better understanding, since we have time tonight to do that. So could we start with curriculum implementation leaders? Who's going to take that one?
That's me, Heidi. I want to start just by kind of clarifying the question. I want to make sure that as I lead you through this review, I'm actually answering the question. So, Mr. Rollins, I believe it was your initial question. Would you mind clarifying that for me?
So, Dr. Jarrett sort of teed this up, and this is the discussion we've been having. They're actually, when we look at these programs, we're looking at really two different things, or potentially looking at two different. One is, are we implementing them correctly, or is there a way? Are we somehow falling down on the implementation? And then the ultimate question, though, ought to be, are we getting, and the whole process is called academic return on investment, are we getting an academic return on this investment? Is it having an actual impact on student achievement? And one of the concerns that I've been articulating is when I look at these plan designs, they seem focused almost entirely on the implementation. And I don't really see a focus through the metrics that are being measured on whether or not we're actually producing results with the students. And that's my primary concern, is that we lose sight of the ultimate goal of this process, which is to determine whether the money that we're spending is actually having the impact that we want it to have on student achievement.
So, I wasn't sure if Dr. Jarrett was going to jump in. So I think I'm going to start with our curriculum implementation leaders, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of engage in this discussion and have some clarity around this. So you're right, there's two different ways to look at it. Number one, are we even doing our implementation? We say with fidelity. What does that mean? And how do we measure implementation? And to get even to that first step requires a lot of calibration and a lot of deep discussion on what the purpose of the position is, and then how we know when we're implementing it. What are the signs that would let us know this is successful? So what we ran into this year, of course, because we had a really hard year last year with ransomware in the fall, and then emergency spring learning or remote learning in the spring, is we found that if we just relied on the student growth metric, which for the implementation leaders, the curriculum implementation leaders, or CILs, it was called the FSA, the Focus Skills Assessment. We were not even able to get an accurate read on that because we had disrupted assessment time in the fall and then disrupted assessment time in the spring. So ultimately, that's our impact on student outcomes, is we want to see that as a result of tight implementation with goals focused around PLCs and their data analysis of student needs, we're seeing stronger and stronger student outcomes on the FSA, or the Focus Skill Assessment. But if we only look at the focus skill assessment and we put kind of all of our eggs into that basket, if there's any interruption in that, like there was last year, we don't have much to go on. The other part of it is making sure that we're able to correlate the implementation metrics and then the student outcomes. And if we're not focused on strong implementation, then we're left with more questions than we are answers. So one of the items that Mr. Epperson, who's our Executive Director of Curriculum, has noted in his PDSA annual review for this particular position is that moving forward, they'll be using, yes, the FSA scores in all of our content areas that have CILs, but also revised implementation plans. An implementation plan for a CIL walks the curriculum implementation leader through a self-assessment to do with the PLC, data analysis to identify a greatest area of need, and then goal setting. And so by monitoring implementation of those key steps in the PLC, we're also getting at targeted goals per PLC for student growth. And then we also included participation in professional learning because we believe that professional learning in these roles is critical to their success. And also how frequently our meetings are actually happening with not only the instructional team at the school level, but then also the meeting between the CIL and the curriculum dean where that coaching and support is happening on a monthly basis. So by looking at all three of those metrics, we feel like it'll give us a good data set to start making some correlation and also to be asking questions about what's not working in implementation and why. And if we see fantastic implementation, but we're seeing no return on investment in terms of our student growth metrics, that's a problem. And so we need to be asking ourselves, were these the wrong things? Or were we measuring them in the wrong way? So to get at kind of how are we going to know if this is making an impact on students, I think we need to be looking at the full package of metrics. I also want to acknowledge that this is a new position. And so starting a new position, starting a new habit, starting a new routine requires actually happening on the ground as well for implementation so that we know we're headed down the right path. We're seeing some consistency across the board, and that's important as we start things from nothing. Is that the kind of conversation that you're hoping to have tonight? I hope that that was helpful.
Okay.
So I'm going to jump in here, and I think part of the importance of this, the words you used, that the administration of the FSA was disrupted. And yet in the annual report, it speaks to the fact that the teachers did not believe in the assessment or didn't think it had assessed what they wanted it to, and they self-reported not using it. So it's not just that we had the ransomware and technology problem. It's not just that we had COVID. It's that we had a tool that we didn't have buy-in on. Now, at the end of this, it says that since we're saying that the assessment is going to tell us whether or not we think that what we're doing is working or making a difference, it says that you're going to change, not you personally, but that assessment will be changed, correct? So what are we going to go to?
I'm sorry, say that last part again, that the FSA is going to be changed or that the metric is going to be changed?
Yeah, I read in here that we're not going to use the FSA. Right?
We do still plan to use the FSA, but not solely the FSA because it doesn't work as just one metric. And you are correct. There are implementation problems with the focus skill assessment. And part of that has to do with connecting the leadership. The CIL is the PLC leader. And that's part of our job here is making sure that we're all on the same page with the assessment and what the assessment measures and why it's so important to give. And that was part of the impetus of creating this position is having a stronger tie to each PLC between the curriculum department and the principal and the PLC leader. So you're right, it's not just ransomware and it's not just emergency remote learning. I didn't mean to represent it that way.
Okay. Well, and there's different levels of assessment, and we'll see this kind of theme across these three groups that I've been thinking about, and that is what we have internally, which the FSA would be, I mean, do we have an internal common assessment across the district, or?
That's the focus skill assessment. They're given 3 times a year.
Right. But the focus skill doesn't actually look at the curriculum, right? It's a bigger picture sort of assessment. It's not really determining whether they're learning what we're teaching them. Is that correct? How does it compare to a standards-based assessment, say?
Well, the focus skill assessments were created by our CLTs. We looked at all of the areas of standards in social science, science, math, and literacy to start with. And we looked at all the areas where those standards intersect. And from them, there are 3 kind of buckets of standards where they intersect. And that's where our focus skill assessments are built. So there are 3 common threads across all content area, and then the content on each of those assessments is specialized to, for example, global studies or biology or integrated science too. So it's testing the skill that's common to students, but in that particular discipline. It is absolutely assessing the skills that we're wanting to see students improve on year over year, assessment over assessment. So does it test what's being taught? Yes. Does it test the curriculum? Yes. It is not a series of multiple choice questions, however. These are performance tasks where we're asking students to engage with material from their content.
Okay, so it is content-based then. But it is district content-based. So if you could give us an idea how then on a bigger, how does that compare with a more standardized assessment that, you know, the state or the map or, you know, the area? Are we only as a metric looking at how we're doing with localized assessments, or are we also bringing those others in?
We're also bringing those others in. So there's a nice crosswalk between what we're measuring on the focus skill assessment and how putting our focus on those particular areas actually prepares students to take standardized tests like the SAT. The College Board has a document called Skills Insight, and we're able to really get down to what we're assessing on the FSA and how it supports students in their eventual success on the SAT.
Okay. So, Tim, I'm not sure it's answered all your questions, but there are areas that were listed for improvement next year. There were 3: collaboration with principals, especially with the hiring and setting PLC agendas, making sure that the SILs have adequate time, not only to work in the PLCs, but to do some peer interaction by visiting other classrooms. And the 3rd area was to work on academy alignment. There's problems with the SILs not being as effective because of having to go over multiple academies because there aren't enough special classes in a single academy. Excuse me.
I guess I'll just sort of summarize what I think I heard. I just pulled up I went back to the committee of the whole meeting and I pulled the document up.
Me too. I did the same.
By the way, it would have been probably helpful to have all of this reattached for us in this meeting. So it says, what measures did you use to evaluate the impact of your PDSA in year 1 of any curriculum rollout? We monitor the administration of common focus skills assessments to ensure that those assessments are given and data is collected. In year 2, we monitor administration as well as proficiency data. So I think what I heard you say is that the focus skills assessment is something that we created that's supposed to show whether or not kids are meeting standards for that grade. Is that what it is?
Yeah, for that particular course, yes.
For that particular course and that particular grade?
Yep.
Okay. And you are saying in this document that then one of the measures you're going to use to evaluate the effectiveness of the CILs is to look at that proficiency data and see whether there's improvements in the data.
Yes. So year 1, are we giving the assessment across the board? Because Jude already pointed to some challenges there and making sure that the assessment's being given. And then year 2, okay, we're giving the assessment. We've gotten feedback on how it went with students. Year 2, how are students doing? And we need to be able to see some growth.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Jude, I'll just give my thoughts is it seems to be an obvious statement to make, but I think the board is feeling that, we want to see that you're investing this much money in positions or materials or training or whatever, and in the end, is it improving or driving the needle on student achievement? That has been the board's #1 priority for the last several years, is trying to figure out what are the best tools in our toolbox to drive student achievement. So it makes sense to me that this would be one of the tools, but I guess what bothers me a little bit is that we haven't seen the results yet.
Well, and I think one of the most important parts of these annual review forms is the page where it says, what are you going to do? And this one says it needs to be fixed. So that's part of the reason we're looking at that, the return on our investment, before we just deciding it doesn't work altogether, but looking at it more closely and deciding what needs to be done to have it fixed. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity just to look, but one of the places that it's not working well is middle school. This is just for secondary schools, the middle schools and Roosevelt, and that's because the CIL has to work across grade levels. And so they may be very familiar with the grade level that they're teaching and working with, but having to work with multi-grade levels is a challenge. That's what's written in the report, and if that's
absolutely. And prior to taking this approach, we put all of our resources into only department chairs, only in high school. There wasn't any connection to middle school at all. So part of our goal here was to create that connection in middle school. And what we're learning is PLCs vary in size pretty significantly from school to school. And in those with the largest PLC, we might not be setting people up for success right now, and we're learning that. So what I really appreciate about the opportunity to share these annual reviews with you and also to analyze them with my team is it really makes us stop and take a look at what's happening and really commit to some plans for fixing. I think it's so easy to kind of begin another school year and just keep going. And what I really appreciate about this process is that it's a really formal way for us as a system to pause on the things that we've identified as being important and a potential lever to impact student outcomes and make these fixes. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk through them.
Before we move on, I just, maybe you said you responded to this question earlier, but if the teachers don't see the importance of the FSA and some are not giving it and you're going to continue to use the FSA, do you have a committee that's working with, why not get the teachers together who aren't using it and don't believe it and find out what it is, what are the problems with it, so that we can have more we need buy-in. What good are your numbers going to be if it's not being used across the board? And we certainly can't compare with last year. So,
well, we can't, and we also have to acknowledge the reality of this year as well. It is very real that right now is caring for students, checking in on their well-being, understanding for them how this pandemic has impacted the way that they interact with school. And so this year is different, and that's not to say, oh, well, we won't be able to know. That's so that we can really just take in the whole context of this year. But to answer your question specifically, that's why we have constructs like our curriculum leadership teams and like our instructional council. And our first instructional council meeting of the year will be next week, next Wednesday. We've kind of paused on it. We had to readjust our structure because we're not going to pull anyone out of school, obviously. So we've landed on that, and our discussions will continue there. We have, I think it's 3 CILs who sit on instructional council, and a major part of their role, and Ben Epperson is also on instructional council, a major part of their role is speaking honestly and directly about their implementation efforts as a CIL, both with the focus skill assessments and leading the PLCs. And so it's that body where we're really having those conversations and listening and iterating for improvement.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions about the CILs before we move on? All right, who's up next, Heidi?
Kind of feels like a game show.
I'll go.
Dr. Vosberg, would you like to go next for instructional
Sure,
coaches?
I'll go. Let me start out. I just want to give a couple thanks for the Rockford Promise, big announcements a day. And, you know, I got introduced to the concept maybe 2 months onto the job back in 2011 by the late Jan Jones, retired RPS teacher. And she's very passionate about it, and I know her family is as well. So a lot of work was done prior to me getting involved. Elaine Breck done a lot of work, volunteer hours. Brian Kabishka, Susan Fumo has done a great work as well. And then Dr. Jarrett and his partnerships and relationships with NIU, very critical in the work. So kudos to everybody. I know I got some thank yous, but I've really stepped out of the way the last couple of years, and it's taken off. So great to see that, and I'm very happy for our community. On to our Tier 2 annual review, PDSA for instructional coaches. I know you've reviewed it and looked at it. Susan Fumo has done a nice job of detailing the work. I think in the spirit of the conversation regarding CILs, we're really focused on the quantitative data. And if you were to look at the PDSA, that's to start at page 3, bottom of page 3 and bottom of page 4, 2 data points were used. First, they used the coaching cycles based on what we call type 3 assessments. These are teacher-created assessments, and we were tracking data and watching progress in 2017-18 all the way to 2019-20 with mixed results. And then we also used MAP data for 2 years as well. The data on MAP is a little inconclusive. As you can see, we didn't show an improvement, but we also added more coaches. Therefore, it's hard to make a comparison year over year. 4 more coaches working with potentially 80 more teachers. So the quantitative data is mixed, but we know it's important, and we're going to continue to focus on collecting that data, primarily using our short cycle goal setting, which are driven by classroom created assessments, and making sure those assessments are aligned to our type 1 assessments and state assessments. Otherwise, the work will not connect. So it is important to monitor the quantitative data. We're going to continue to do that. It's tough, obviously. The last 2 years will be really tough to draw conclusions. Doesn't mean we're not going to do it, because I think it's still important to analyze and review. The qualitative evidence that was shared out was around expansion. As you can see, we started with 17, and now we're at 32 coaches. That's driven by demand from the schools. This is part of our site-based budgeting process. Principals are having conversations with each other. They're observing this. They're seeing the impact. We're taking our best teachers and putting them in positions to lead other teachers. And that qualitative feedback has been very positive, and we're going to continue to build on that. We also see greater implementation of the short cycle goal setting in the classroom. So the teachers can continue to reflect on their own practice and work with students to reflect on their own learning. We know that's best practice, and we've observed that in other districts. So we'll continue to do that work. And we do have, as we open positions, another qualitative data point would just be the depth of applicants from the region that are interested in doing the work and making a difference, getting great feedback from coaches. And I've received feedback as well from people I know personally that have decided to become coaches, and the impact that they believe they're having to support students and teachers. This process gives us an opportunity to reflect each year on what's working, what's not working, and what we can improve. And that is shared again, and I won't read all that to you, but that's a part of our process. And we did find some gaps, which is a positive. That's the whole point of doing the work. And so we are working to improve partnerships, improve professional development, hire more bilingual coaches, building the relationships, getting adults to trust each other, to do things differently, to be vulnerable. It takes time, it takes relationships. Well, those are all things that are decisions that are being made. We're moving forward to build on the work.
Thanks, Matt. Part of Ms. Fumo, you gave during DLT, you gave a presentation about what teachers valued or our teachers are valuing right now, and peer-to-peer relationships was, I believe, number 1, and then PLCs was number 2, but their instructional coaches was in the top 3. In addition to that, buildings are using their own budgets to hire additional instructional coaches. So I think both of those are telling that the teachers are feeling like they're getting support and work. And I think that trust piece, Matt, was really important because it's an in-building hire, but reports to downtown and needs to develop a relationship so that they know that they're really there to help them. Nobody's there to, transfer any information that they might not want, that they're really there to help support them and make them a better teacher. So does anybody else have anything they want to say about the instructional coaches?
This is Tim. I'll just say I've heard nothing but good things about this, which is the qualitative piece of it. It would be nice to have stronger quantitative data, but the thing that makes me feel a little bit better about it is if the principals are using their own budgets on an individual school-by-school basis to add instructional coaches. They're the ones who are on the ground looking, and they're the ones that ultimately we should be holding accountable for building performance. Individual building performance. And so if they think that this is a good use of their money, then I think that that's probably a pretty good indication.
And this is one of the few of the 3 that we're looking at tonight that doesn't kind of put a finger back to downtown as not, as being part of the problem, not having support. We saw that with the CIL. We're going to see that with the MCL not having the district level support because of turnover. So I think that is kudos to central office, and I think this report is from Mrs. Fumo because she's in charge of that, and so that was another positive. Moving on, Mr. Zediger, that would be you with the MCLs.
Yes, and so in short, to answer Mr. Rollins' question about data, what we would look at for quantitative data on the MCL, we will use MAP. We will use common informative assessments that the buildings create. They could use and decide to use some tier 2 assessments, whether that's the Fontes and Pinnell or Dibbles or other assessments that are available to the buildings. The key with the MCL and the design of the quantitative measures is going to be based off the building plan. And so Mrs. McCullough just alluded to the central office support and part of the fixing of the MCL and the lack of support from central office for this program. We need to make sure, and part of the fix is it's professional development, it's the ability to support PLCs, but also then the accountability piece with the principals in the building to ensure that we're following the building plan that was developed by the MCL, the other teachers within the grade level, and administration. And so those are all options and opportunities for the quantitative data piece. Obviously this year, even in the fall with MAP, our young ones, kindergarten first, didn't have that opportunity for remote. And so we won't use that this year for quantitative. And so it's going to be key as the MCL and even the aspiring teacher work with the other grade level partners and the administration to decide how can we gather some quantitative data. So year in and year out, I think there are opportunities to have some consistency of what assessments you're looking at for the year over year. Another way to measure some of that effectiveness is with reduction of major office discipline referrals. I am always hesitant to use referrals as any kind of metric because you can manipulate referral writing and whether you decide to write it or not. But I think it could be a good lead indicator in terms of relationships and the ability to have an extra adult within that grade level to be proactive with relationships and with student discipline, and yet not have the teaching stop because you have an aspiring teacher or you have another teacher in the classroom to continue on with instruction. Another key piece to this, I think, is this program really looks at three different kind of issues that the district tries to deal with. First and foremost, it is student outcomes, academically and social emotionally. However, there is a component of increased capacity by additional teachers within the grade level. So our MCLs are interviewed and identified as teacher leaders, much like Dr. Bosberg alluded to with instructional coaches, to leverage their expertise, both with teaching practices, with analyzing data, leading PLCs. And so we wanted to create the climate and the culture within the buildings where you can work together as colleagues. And if we're taking and using our best teachers at the elementary level to impact their colleagues, I think that offers some return in years to come. So there's stronger tier one instruction, stronger ability to analyze data and to make differentiated plans and instruction based off of that data. The third piece also, though, is a recruitment tool and preparation of that recruitment. This is a pipeline mechanism. This is a powerful program. When we go to NIU, to Rockford University, we've had aspiring teachers from Kansas State University, from Grand Canyon. This has now begun to spread and people are asking questions about it. And so if we're able to use this as a recruitment tool during this teacher shortage and bring them to Rockford, not only are we getting them to experience Rockford, but now we get them for a year. Everyone in education knows that first year teaching and how hard it is. And no matter how much a first year teacher tries and tries, they typically just aren't as good as somebody who's done it for 6-7 years to kind of develop and have all the arrows in the quiver for classroom management, for questioning techniques and different nuances that come within the classroom. And so not only are we recruiting and creating the pipeline for those, but then we're able to actually get there and train them for a full year. And so then their comfortability with taking over a classroom in year one versus just a semester, again, I think would provide gains for our students in years to come as they don't have as much of a implementation dip, if you will. And so there is going to be some qualitative pieces to this on top of the quantitative. As Mrs. McCulloch alluded to with the central office support, we didn't really have a great structure for support for the principals on how to monitor this program in the building. Principal supervision was, certainly extended thin. We added a new position or returned a position to reduce the number of schools that our elementary supervisors oversaw. So we'll have the opportunity to spend more time with these principals and MCLs. The director of teacher effectiveness, which was tasked with supporting the MCLs from a PLC standpoint and some development, has had turnover. And then having that lack of framework for them to tap into for leadership skills and different skills and capacity building that they need to lead colleagues. And all of that put together, I think, as we look at, are we building and implementing the professional development that's necessary both for the principals and the MCLs? How are our aspiring teachers feeling in terms of preparation? Was the program a draw to RPS? Is it something that's going to have a positive effect on them and staying within? And are we hiring our aspiring teachers to become full-time REA members? And then I think the last piece of some qualitative data is also the students. How did it feel to have more adults, to move from one group to another? And I think the students are going to be a big piece to this, because if they feel like they're more involved in their education, they've got some more lower student to teacher ratio, and things look different from a from an SEL perspective versus an academic perspective. I think those are all things that we need to take a look at in terms of the effectiveness of the program. But I think the key with the return on investment, and it's been alluded to earlier, is that this gives us the opportunity to really examine the program, and we feel like this program is something that could differentiate RPS from other districts. But if we're not doing it correctly, if we're not giving the support or implementing correctly, then we're never going to see the results that we need. And so part of this kind of reset and re-looking at how we're offering and supporting this program is going to be a big key to what I think we'll see in terms of quantitative data over the next couple of years. And the program has expanded. We're up to 17 aspiring teachers and MCLs, which is double than what we had last year. And I think if we continue down this path and really elicit feedback and continue down a continuous improvement cycle, this is something that, again, buildings are going to start purchasing from Title I funds or Fund 10 funds, because they can see the impact that it can have within the classrooms and their students.
So Matt, just to clarify for numbers, we are at 17, but we had 18 openings, correct?
Correct. We did not fill the 18th MCL position through interviews. They didn't feel that there was a candidate that we wanted to put in that position for the 18th.
And I thought we had 12 last year.
We started out with 12, and then we lost some right immediately at the beginning of the year.
Was last year the year we lost? I had 4.8. I don't know why I had 4.8. Did we lose 4?
Yes, we lost 4 last year, and then we lost, I believe, 3 the year prior to that.
3 the year before that. And did we have 12 the year before that as well?
No, we had 8 to start with the year before that.
So we had 8, we lost 3. So we only ended up with 5 2 years ago. We had 12, we lost 4. We ended up with 8 the second year. And this year we have 17. We don't know what we'll end up with. And how about our aspiring teachers? What are our numbers like for that? You and I went over those, but just to share with the board, how many we started with each of these 3 years, and how many for the last 2?
So those numbers that you would have mentioned, Mrs. McCulloch, were our aspiring teachers. So there is, in order to be an MCL, there has to be an accompanying aspiring teacher and vice versa. So it's a pair. And so when we lose aspiring teacher, those are the numbers that we're talking about in terms of attrition. We have hired 12 aspiring teachers that have been in our programs over the last 3 years. And so that's not as good as I want it to be, but I do think that is a nice baseline to take a look at as we continue to bump the program up, and as we see more aspiring teachers and more MCLs. We'd like to see that percentage of aspiring teachers becoming our permanent REA members certainly go up.
And when an aspiring teacher leaves us, which you are now have them sign a promissory note when they come. Correct. But when they leave us, then the MCL is no longer an MCL, right? They're just a classroom teacher?
They still have the responsibilities of PLC lead. Part of the building plans have the MCLs working on professional development with the administrator in terms of offering and preparing that for the building. And so one of the pieces of the MCL does go away with preparing the aspiring teacher, but they still do have other components to that differential.
And the adjustment that you're making for next year to allow a first-year teacher to be an aspiring teacher, is that at a full pay grade and they're a student still in that aspiring student position, or are they just at the 15,000, or what is it that we're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have 2 teachers this year that are first-year teachers, but they are listed as aspiring teachers. These are teachers that have come recommended from principals in terms of potential but they would love to see another year of development. And so what we worked out with the building is that currently right now we are doing most of the funding for aspiring teachers. So we would continue with that funding of $15,000, and the building would have to make up the difference between the first year salary and the aspiring teacher. We wanted to incentivize us a little bit because we do think there are some inherent advantages of getting a first year teacher who is almost there, but really could catapult with one more year. It also does allow and give some flexibility for MCL grade levels. If they have a current MCL now that's in college and they wanted to keep the team together for another year for some consistency and working together, it would allow that, that grade level and that building to do so at their cost.
And so really out of the 17 that you have, we really have 15 new aspiring teachers to the district. Is that what you're saying?
They're all new to the district, but 15 of them are currently in college and 2 of them are considered first year teachers, correct?
Okay, and their buildings pick up the differential.
Correct.
And how many do we have participating in the housing program, please?
We have 4.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about the program or where they're at?
Yeah, I do. I had a couple of questions. So Matt, which schools do we have them in, and at which grade levels at this point?
I have the schools, Mr. Rollins, I'd have to get all of the different grade levels. I can send it to you, but the schools that we have MCLs in this year are Haskell, Whitehead, Riverdale, Lewis Lemon, Lathrop, Hillman, Gregory, Bloom, and Barber.
Was Constance Lane one of them? I thought they did start out at Constance Lane.
Constance Lane was an original school, and they dropped out this year. They did not have support from their staff to want to continue the program, and so they decided not to continue with the MCL program. As is Washington. Washington was an original school, and after the first initial run, they had decided not to continue as well.
So one of the concerns, this fits in with the discussion we're having about what metrics are you looking at. So for instance, after the first year, our first full year of having MCLs at some of the schools, and trying to do an analysis after 1 year of a program, it doesn't really do you any good. I understand that. But after the first year, I could look at performance on the IAR across schools, and the schools that had the program didn't do measurably better than the schools that didn't have them. In fact, often did worse. Now, like I said, doing that analysis after 1 year probably isn't fair, but I would think that doing that analysis after you've got the program up and running would be fair, but I don't see you doing that analysis. I think that's one of my concerns. So we have schools that have the program, we have schools that don't have the program, and our objective ultimately is to get better performance on our state standardized assessments. So shouldn't we be looking at whether or not that actually, at the end of the day, has an impact?
I do think that's a long-term look that we could take a look at, Mr. Rollins, when there is, I think, some consistency built into the program. I think partly with the IAR, you're limiting yourself to grades 3 through 5, and not all of our MCLs are in 3 through 5. We have some MCLs at the kindergarten level, first grade level. But I think, to what I alluded to earlier, and to the consistency of this program, I think that has to be step one. And then if we see a school, say like Lewis Lemon, who has 3 MCLs in the building this year, will those same grade levels continue to have MCLs? Do any of them have returning aspiring teachers so the team stays together for more than 1 year? But once there's some consistency, then I think it is a valuable measure to take a look at. And until we get to that point, I don't think we're going to see great movement with IAR just with those MCL grade levels. I think it will take a couple of years of consistent practice, consistent implementation, consistent professional development before we can start using IAR as a relative measure for whether the MCL program is successful.
All right, I guess, my final comment is if that's the stage that we're in, maybe we should focus less on expanding the program and more on operating it with fidelity where we've got it. And then we will have comparisons at that point. We'll have comparisons between schools that have it and schools that don't.
Yes.
wouldn't be in a rush to expand it until you've done an analysis to see whether it's actually produces results.
Yep, and I actually put that in the annual review, Mr. Rollins, is I do not recommend expanding this program until we get some of these baseline things set up and we can find that they are consistent. And so that is my recommendation as well.
Okay, thanks.
So just for board members' edification, this program cost us $651,000. I do have a question, Matt. When you say buildings like Constance Lane chose not to participate or did not want to have, is that come more from the staff or the principal? And why is it a building would not want an MCL? Because part of their job is to run PCLs and PLCs, sorry. And I don't know who takes those on otherwise, the lead teachers or the like, but what would make a building not want to participate?
Yeah, so Constance Lane, for instance, one of the original MCLs, no longer works in our district. She moved on to a district closer to her home. Some of the MCLs, after the first initial years, wanted to take a step back and not have that extra responsibility. And through the interview process and the principal identifying, they didn't really have any identified staff to interview that would meet the qualifications for the MCL. And so to answer your question, Mrs. McCulloch, it was a little of both. It was little of the staff not wanting to continue, and then the principal taking kind of a survey of the staff to see if there's any candidates they may want to pursue to continue, and they didn't see that.
And if we're looking at assessments, Mr. Rollins, I mean, would you have a problem if they looked at MAP? Why do we have to go to IAR? Because that is at more grade levels, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Better assessment. We've had these conversations about whether when measuring MAP growth from fall to spring, whether that's really a true measure of growth. It would be a better measure of growth on the MAP if we measured spring to spring, but we're not currently doing that.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to add to that conversation? Are those first-year aspiring teachers, by the way, does that go toward their tenure?
Yes, they're considered a certified staff member. It would go towards their tenure.
Okay.
Thank you, Jude.
Thank you. That's
okay.
Way more than maybe you wanted, but appreciate the time.
Okay. Thanks. We'll move on now to agenda item number 7, the report and action items that proceeded through the Planning and Development Committee. 7A, the resolution to approve the notice of the November, actually 24th now. It's being moved to the 24th. So I don't think we need to vote on that one. That's unless someone tells me we need to. We're going to do that on the 24th. Under B.
Mr. Rollins?
Yeah, Ken, I think we do have to vote on that because it's the resolution to approve the notice.
I see.
Before we get to suggest and ask an indulgence, my item 7E really is the same conversation that we've just been having about the other 3 academic return on investment, or the PDSAs. So as long as we're on this topic, can we just take up 7E and talk about Reading Horizons now?
Oh, that'd be fine. Sure.
So 7E is up here for discussion. It's really the same discussion that we never really got to about the Reading Horizons. The difference is that this is a now tier 1 PDSA, is that right? Which means it's a little bit
tier 3.
Tier 3, it's more important.
Forgot where you were going down.
Higher price.
Little bit more robust, but I did have some of the same concerns about what our metrics for success were, because it did seem like that was focused almost entirely on implementation. Just as a reminder, so Reading Horizons is the program that we use to teach literacy from K through 12. IAR does not start testing literacy until 3rd grade. And so I had asked the question, well, shouldn't we be looking as a measure of success for Reading Horizons whether we're seeing progress on the 3rd grade IAR scores, which currently we're not?
Correct. So
So
should we
the purpose, if the whole purpose of that program is to get kids ready for literacy when they test in 3rd grade, wouldn't that be the measure of success?
Well, yes, ultimately that's our lag, right? And part of our lead is, are we implementing the program? So one data point that was not included in our PDSA document, in our I think you had a 1-page summary and then the slide deck, is levels of implementation. So Reading Horizons, the vendor, has 5 levels of implementation that they measure through the implementation coaching, and they range from level 1 to level 5. Where we are in implementation in year 4, I would want to say that we have 100% of our schools in level 5. What that means is that we are seeing consistent implementation of some of the key instructional features of our program. What I know is that we have 10 schools that range from level 2 to level 4 on implementation. What that means to me is we cannot just look at 3rd grade literacy as a lag indicator. We need to really be studying each of our schools, the levels of implementation, to even know if we should expect those results. We should expect those results when we're doing this program as it is designed. If we're not, we shouldn't expect those results. And so the way that we've constructed this Tier 3 academic return on investment study is, yes, to look at student outcomes. First, we're looking at the assessments that occur within the program, because those are strong indicators, and they have a direct correlation to the instructional model. The other piece is, are we executing the training and the coaching? And then our teachers executing 80% of the items on the coaching checklist. Those are all proxy for ensuring that we have consistent deployment and equity of opportunity in our instruction across the district. So as I started with, I would hope to see in year 4 that we are at level 5 in every school. But as I mentioned, we have 10 schools where we're between levels 2 and 4. And that tells me that we need to be asking more questions, and we need to be doing more analysis about our implementation. And, again, with an academic return on investment study, we're not just kind of going the distance for the whole year and then looking back as an autopsy. We'll be doing data collection throughout the year and working with our core group, our focus group, that includes teachers, an instructional coach, principals, and central office team, to ask, why aren't we seeing this level of implementation? So in a program like Reading Horizons, I think it is prudent to really put our attention at first on this long-term study into where we're implementing well and where we're not. And the way that we have our data segmented by students also allows us to do that kind of correlation between where we're seeing high levels of implementation and high levels of student growth. Our hypothesis, of course, is where we're implementing well, we're making the most impact on students. And so we'll be monitoring that throughout the year, but also the length of the study. And so that implementation gives us not only segmentation information, but also really the ability to dig deep in each school to ask good questions.
So if we've got schools that are at level 5 implementation now, which is, if I heard you correctly, means it's being fully implemented, we can't do an analysis now for those schools, whether we're seeing an impact?
Yeah, we can and we are. And what we're seeing, again, the kind of the working hypothesis, and we have some data to support this, is that some of the indicators like time on software, it can't be looked at as the only indicator, but like time on software, student growth, and then strong implementation, where we see those measures align, we know that things are really working because we're seeing the impact on students. The purpose of the design phase of the academic return on investment study is to make sure that we as a district understand how we're defining success in each of those items so that we can apply that equally across the board. Without the formal structure of the AROI study, we're really kind of conjecturing. We might be defining things differently, but by getting really detailed about which items on the checklist, at which level, what do we expect to see, and when, we're really putting some strong parameters on the study that help us get tighter and tighter on that analysis. So yes, we have the data now, but without the formal study structure, it was not as tight as it needed to be to then drive change in how we move forward with the program.
But I don't recall. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I don't recall from the PDSA or that at any point you were looking at impact on third grade IAR literacy scores. And I guess we've had this program in place for a number of years now. And if you're telling me that we have schools that, in your view, are implementing it correctly, we can't look at to see whether we're seeing an impact on IAR scores in those schools?
Well, not now, Mr. Rollins, because we've had last year was a pandemic and this year we're in a pandemic. So we're setting the foundation for the future.
But it's 4 years. It's 4 years. What about those first 2 years? And you can, I mean, there's software.
What we're saying is that there's been bad implementation. We're just like with freshman academies, et cetera, those two big ones. We picked these because they're high impact and we think there are challenges with implementation. So what we absolutely want to do is connect those dots in the long term. But if we look back to 2 years ago when we had good data, that's not going to be an accurate representation of what we want to do moving forward, I think is what we're saying.
Ideally, we're looking at the full treatment, kinder first, second, then IAR in third grade. Last year's third graders were not tested, and they would have only had first and second grade. So it doesn't give us the full picture. So yes, you're absolutely right. That third grade is the metric that we're looking to impact. We haven't had a full treatment kinder through standardized testing yet.
But this is going through my committee because this is the plan. We're doing the plan design right now. I'm just telling you, I don't recall we had this discussion included in the plan design that we would look at the impact on third grade IAR scores for literacy.
You're correct. Our plan design for this year is we're starting with a 1 year, starting from a baseline because we're new. But this isn't just a 1 year study, it's a multi-year study. So as we get into the analysis phase, we'll go through again our goal setting and setting our goals for the next year. So you're right, yes, that is the lag indicator that we need to be moving and paying attention to. In year one, we're looking at the spelling and word recognition assessment and implementation measures.
All right. Well, okay. I've beat this horse to death. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about this, about the Reading Horizons? If not, then I will take us back up to 7A, resolution.
Mr. Rollins, I just want to make sure we're clear that we do hear you loud and clear that you want this to ultimately move those core standardized state tests, assessments. We're hearing that loud and clear, and that will continue to be reflected in the analysis moving forward. We know that the leads matter, but we ultimately are hearing loud and clear from you, and I think from the rest of the board, that you want to ultimately see a big program like this matter on the lagging indicators like the IAR test, and we will make sure that that is part of the discussion moving forward and very clearly part of the discussion.
Excuse me, but I think it's just as important that we're seeing implementation. It is very disconcerting to me that we spend a lot of money and effort in professional development and coaching on programs to help move achievement, and that teachers choose not to use them. And we need to know why they're not using them and help them. And maybe these lagging indicators showing growth would be some sort of incentive, but in the end of the game, we're not going to know if it works if they don't use it. So how do we make sure that our teachers are demonstrating fidelity with the programs that we're providing?
Absolutely, Mrs. McCulloch. The fidelity of implementation is the whole key is matching fidelity of implementation with results, and that is what we aspire to accomplish with this Tier 3 analysis.
Okay.
Okay, if there
we have a couple things. You want to do those, Tim?
Sure. So 7A, resolution to approve notice of November 10th, 2020 public hearing. Again, a reminder, when we talk about the e-learning plan, this has nothing to do with remote learning. This is a state directive to convert to e-learning if we have any snow days in the future. So they won't be snow days in the future. So all this resolution is doing is to approve a notice of a public hearing to be held on November 24th, 2020, which is our next board meeting.
Right.
So is there a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved. Second.
Do I call that question, Ken, or do you?
No, doesn't matter.
Oh, I guess it'll be a roll call.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right. Yeah.
Actually, I do have a question about this, if I could.
I think the questions come after we do the vote.
Well, we got a motion, a second on the table, so now there's
you're right. Okay, you're right. Okay.
So I know this is only to vote on having the public hearing, but since it was mentioned what this really is, they talked about having a not to exceed 5 days per academic year. It kind of dawned on me, what happens if we run into a situation like we had 2 years ago where we had more than 5 snow or emergency days? I'm assuming we'll still hold e-learning. But what
No, that's
happens?
all we can have by contract, isn't it? That's all we can add in.
So what happens when you have a 6th or 7th day?
Yeah, Mr. Siegel was suggesting, we had this conversation during our 2-on-1 today, and what he was concerned about is, what if we have a year where there are 7 days that are altered by weather, which we've had in the past? Are we able to use more than those 5 and alter 7 days if there's 7 days we can't physically transport students to school, assuming a more normal set of circumstances or year? Is that accurate, capturing what you were asking, Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
This is Lori. May I answer?
Yeah, I figure you would be the right one to answer that, Lori.
Yeah. So we did have a situation where we had more emergency days that had to be called, and we were only permitted to use 5 of those emergency days. And the reason for that is that the school code sets the max number of days that you can have, and the school code also, and the regional office does not allow us to exceed the 5 days.
But what would be different here is, in a previous scenario, we would not go to school on January 7th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 18th, and 20th, let's say. Just we hit 6 days, and then we'd make them up June 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Okay? This is saying, hey, we're just going to have school on all of those days.
Right. It's a regular attendance day.
And we just wouldn't exceed. So if it's 7 days that are super cold in a particular year, why wouldn't we just make up those 7 days? Because we're not really going to 185 days. We're just using the 174 days as they happen, as opposed to waiting in the end to make them up. I think that's what Mr. Siegel is getting at.
Okay, yeah. So you still get the max number of school days that's permitted by statute. So
we would want to make sure we're not.
Yeah, conceivably you could and would go ahead and use 2 of the emergency days that you have set at the end of the year then.
Well,
if you had 7 snow days, 5 would be e-learning, 2 would be at the end of the year.
But could we just have 9 e-learning days, I guess is our question, if we had 9 days that we were going to lose the days because of cold temperatures or snow? Or are we limited to 5?
I'll have to look at that issue, Aaron. I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, Mr. Siegel just asked this right before the meeting, so I apologize. I didn't give advance notice on this one. It's a good question, and I couldn't answer it.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it is mentioned that it would be just a regular attendance day. And if it is just a regular attendance day, we've satisfied the attendance requirement through e-learning. Was it actually an emergency day?
Right. I'll have to look at the rules to see what the regional office and what the statute would allow if we can have more than the 5 emergency days.
Okay, thank you.
Ken, may I ask you another question? This is Jude.
Sure.
So when we were in DLT yesterday, they were talking about students who do not have devices, who are, I know early childhood does not have devices. I don't know about the elementary school students who are attending fully in person. How do you suddenly have e-learning for those students on an emergency day when they don't have devices?
All of our K-12 students have a device. What will have to happen is in elementary schools, for example, we generally have a good lead time on when an emergency day may be impending due to a snowstorm, for example. And so we'll need to send devices home with children, and we'll need to be sending instruction and a protocol to all classrooms to send devices home with children. Our students in grades 6 through 12, however, have take home, so they have their devices with them all the time. To prepare for this, we instructed our elementary schools to go ahead and assign the device to an individual student at the beginning of the year, so that student already has their own device.
So all well and good that we know that we think this is going to happen, and it happens or it doesn't happen, but I think about the learning curve with families who are learning remotely and were given devices and just at the beginning of the year, logging on, trying to figure out platforms, all those things that these families, I just wonder if we're going to get the best bang for our buck. And I know we'd rather have more instruction earlier in the year than later in the year because of testing and the like, but we might as well make it worth our while. And I think that because of that learning curve, unless everybody's already gone remote and they all know how to do it, I'm wondering how effective that'll be.
If there's no others, I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the resolution to approve the e-learning plan.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Tim, I think I'll go ahead and do the next 3, and then you can take over the discussions at the end. 7B is the public sale of the Operations Support Center on Kishwaukee Street. Is there a motion and a second to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll have the coordinator and then call the roll on the approval of item 7B, the public sale of the Op Center on Kishwaukee Street.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Item 7C is the resolution to approve the 2020 tax levy. This was presented to us at our committee of the whole. Is there a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion?
This is Tim. I want to understand.
Go ahead, Tim.
What the proposal is. So we discussed 3 different versions at the committee meeting. One was to do a flat levy, which is what we've done for the past, 7 or 8 years. One would be to not take CPI, but take new property. And then the third one was to take CPI and new property. And I believe this represents the second alternative, no CPI, but new property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Michelle, for those that are on the board that aren't attorneys, could I ask you to just give the answer to the question of what is included in new property when we say we're taking new property?
I'm going to start getting away from saying taking new property. I think it's been very confusing and what really is happening when we, what I'm doing is including the new property that the county gives us in the actual calculation. So in the slides that are attached to this meeting, I have included the top part of this calculation where I include the $12 million of new property. That's the amount that we are allowed to levy because of the new property that is estimated in the county. In the district. So that amount was $12 million. That amounts to $730,000 that we are going to include in our levy request. So we are also allowed to include CPI, as Mr. Rollins has talked about. You know, we're allowed to do CPI and new property. So we're just asking for new property to be included in this levy.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Connor?
Yeah, Mrs. Yar, could you state, because you did document it, but just for people that might be listening, what is the dollar difference between including just the new property and the CPI?
The new property would be an additional $730,000 from the actual flat dollar amount levy. And if we included CPI and new property, that amount would be $3.9 million. So what we are foregoing is $3.2 million of what we are allowed to actually levy.
Okay, any other comments?
Mr. Scribano, I do. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Mike, were you
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. And in terms of the actual rate to taxpayers, what effect, if any, would the consideration of the new property do to the actual tax rate?
It's very minimal at that point. So the actual flat levy, which is on slide 10, is 6.5235 for actual flat dollar amount, just for taking the same dollar amount. And with including the new property, it's 6.5542.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would just add the context, Ms. Yar, I believe we were at 6.93 last year. So no matter what, we're talking about very substantial year-over-year decreases in the tax rate. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, EAV has something to do with it.
Of course.
Also, you know, paying off one of our debts. I mean, these things play into that tax rate. But yes.
But someone who is in our school district, their tax rate, what we're really talking about is whether their tax rate would drop from 693 down to 655 or 652.
Yeah, in 2019, we ended up at 6.8929.
Excuse me.
Going down to 6.5542.
So 689 down to 655 or 689 down to 652. So, and I believe at our peak, our rate was at $7.93. So the board's work has really paid significant dividends. I think this is one of the larger year-over-year drops either way.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel, you had a question?
Yeah, it's kind of already been explained, but I just want to put a really fine point on it. For those who do not have new property, which is going to be the bulk of the people in Winnebago County, they are simply going to see, you know, a flat tax levy. So they should not see an increase in their property taxes. In fact, they're going to see a reduction in their rate because of the increase in the EAV. Is that correct?
There's going to be a decrease in the tax rate.
I'm sorry?
There's a decrease in the tax rate.
That's correct.
Yes.
So the question was posed to me today. How is this going to affect, you know, my property tax rate? It was asked by another, you know, homeowner, and I was explaining, since we're only taking new property, this isn't going to affect what we're drawing from you. Rather, you're simply, because you're seeing an increase in the value of your property, you are seeing no new money given to us, and your tax rate's going down. and somehow I was not believed.
I think there's a misconception, and Ms. Yar, correct me if I'm wrong, but what new property does is it just contributes to the overall equalized assessed value of the district, right? And so it isn't like just the new property tax payers are impacted one way or the other, right? This is about the total rate is impacted from $6.89 down to $6.55 or $6.89 down to $6.52, depending on whether we include that in the calculation. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Yard, but that's my understanding. There really isn't a distinction whether you built a new house or whether you had a house for 20 years.
Understood.
So I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
Right. So I mean, I'll just chime in. If we just did a flat levy, we would be levying against not that flat dollar amount, against not only the existing property but also the new property. And so everyone's rate would drop a little bit, including the existing property owners.
Right.
But the difference between the two, as shown on page 11 of the PowerPoint that Ms. Yar has attached, is 3 cents per $100 of assessed valuation.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, June.
So if I'm reading this correctly, even if we took the CPI, the tax rate would still go down. Is that correct? 6.6.
It's yes. Yeah. From last year. Yeah, that's correct.
Why are we not considering that?
I think I can weigh in with that. We've had a long-standing practice of working with the other taxing bodies to work together to lower the overall tax rate. And if we were to start doing that in a year where we didn't see such good growth, I think we would run the risk of property growing slower in future years as RPS and other taxing bodies go back to taking that full amount. Yes, it gives us more money in the short term, but I think the long-term risk is we would start to see less year-over-year growth. I think we've had a really strong track record of fueling property value increases from a really, really significant decline in value post-2008. And we've climbed out of a good chunk of that, but I think my recommendation would be that we would continue to fight hard to grow those property values and continue to lower rates at as quick a rate as possible. I do think that this taking new property is a good compromise because it still encourages our other partner taxing bodies to hold the line, and I think will still do the trick in terms of maximizing property value growth so that rates can continue to decrease relatively quickly.
That makes sense.
Okay, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 7C, the resolution to approve the 220 tax levy.
Ms. Danford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, 7D then is the resolution abating the tax heretofore levied for the year 2020 to pay debt service on taxable general obligation school bonds, series for 216. Is there a motion and a second to approve item 7D?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of item 7D.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, I will turn it back over to Mr. Rollins to cover the two remaining discussion topics, facilities condition assessment and the county sales tax discussion.
You're muted. You're muted, Mr. Rollins.
On the facilities condition assessment, we were short on time at the committee of the whole meeting, and there were a lot of questions. And I think people just had sort of very specific questions that they were hoping Mr. Phillips could answer. So I'll just, and I know Mr. Connor had some of those questions, so I'll just open it up for questions from anybody who wants to ask further questions about that report and some of the specific. I know I asked questions about the HVAC, and I don't know whether Mr. Phillips has had a chance to look into those numbers. There were very large numbers associated with the HVAC, despite the fact that we just actually spent a lot of money on HVAC systems as part of the last facilities plan. So I don't know if we've got an explanation for that.
Yeah, Mr. Rollins, Mr. Jensen, our Director of Design and Construction, put some information together that was sent to the board early this afternoon. Mr. Jensen, do you want to answer or respond to the question about the HVAC, what was spent during the facilities master plan versus what was documented in our facilities condition assessment?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to share. So basically what we have in terms of what was spent in terms of the facilities master plan, we had approximately $31 million being spent on what we would categorize as heating and ventilating systems. Most of that was in terms of boilers and univents and replacing air handling systems. And so that is, and also controls. What we then do is if we take a look at potentially what we have for some other examples from our facilities condition reports out of our VFA software, we took a look at a couple different schools and to give us an idea, and for what would the heating and ventilating expenses for Welsh Elementary School would be $4.5 million. The heating and report for Westview would be like a $2.7 million. The HVAC requirements for Eisenhower Middle School would be a $6 million. And the heating requirements, heating and ventilating, the HVAC requirements for East would be $11 million. And the HVAC requirements for Roosevelt would be a $9 million. Now, when we take a look at the difference between what we spent on in the facilities master plan and what also then is being projected for potential requirements that we would have in the FCI. The FCI is for those things that would have a standard life cycle that would come due within the next 5 years. Most of the items that we're indicating for future expense that were part of the larger dollar amount of the $197 million shown in the report are for primarily that of distribution systems, for exhaust systems, ductwork, unit ventilators, the air handlers, and controls. So when you take a look at all of the components within a building, even though you spend a significant amount of money over in the facilities master plan, there are multiple components that make up a heating and ventilating system. And so therefore there are additional dollars to be spent. Spend a lot of dollars on boilers, and upcoming for projected expenses would be those of probably closer to that of being in the building distribution systems, such as a two-pipe system that would actually be the water that goes from the boiler to a unit ventilator, and then the water that that comes back to the boiler in terms of its heating either by hot water or by steam. Does that effectively answer that particular question?
I mean, for me, probably not, but we just got now your report. It didn't get it sent out today, so we haven't had a chance to look at it. So, maybe we can look at this and follow up with any questions that we might have. And I know let's just pick a specific school. So let's take East. So I see that we spent in the facilities plan $2.3 million on boilers at East. So what else has to be done? from an HVAC standpoint at East?
For East, basically, we have approximately $11 million that could be potentially spent based upon the facilities report. Most of that would be into the distribution system. Let me pull it up to take a look.
Mr. Rollins, the largest component at East is approximately $7 million in ductwork throughout the building that would need to be replaced.
I didn't realize East had ductwork.
Yeah, there is forced air to certain areas of the building.
Okay. All right. All right. Does anybody have any other questions? Because I had similar questions on the the second largest number was electricity. And I know we did work on the electrical systems too.
Yeah, Mr. Rollins, and similar situation to the HVAC. We were really focused on, from an HVAC perspective, kind of the front end, so the boilers, the boiler systems, and then the univents. With our electrical, reviewing the facilities master plan, a lot of that was spent in upgrading switchgear within our mechanical rooms to prepare for additions. But what it didn't take into account is secondary panels as well as wire replacement throughout the buildings. So still a lot of electrical to address. That would also include lighting systems throughout the buildings.
Okay. Did anybody else have any questions? Mike, did you have any follow-up questions from the committee?
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. No, I'm going to do the same that you are, which is review the materials in more detail. I think the only point I was trying to make the other night is that there are some big numbers, and I know that there are assumptions and details behind it that we need to look at very carefully, because frankly, there are some buildings that will be very costly to upgrade for all the things that have been noted. And so we need to look at that and the detail carefully.
Did anybody else have any questions for Mr. Phillips? All right, let's move on to the county sales tax discussion. Because we should have this discussion at some point. We might as well have it now. Again, the background is a few years ago, it's probably more than a few at this point, maybe it's 7-8 years ago, the state adopted legislation allowing a school facilities sales tax to be adopted at a county level to benefit all of the schools in that county. And we first talked about this not that long after the legislation was enacted. It was fairly new at that point, didn't really go anywhere. At this point, more than half the counties in the state of Illinois have adopted that tax. You could run a referendum it would have to be done by referendum. You can do up to 1 cent or 1% sales tax, and then the money has to be used for facilities, including bond payments on facilities. So we've got this report that we're sitting on, which shows this very large facilities need, condition assessment, and there's a limited number of ways to pay for that. And the numbers that we're talking about are unlikely to come out of our operating budget. So the question is whether we think we ought to look at running a referendum for this county sales tax. The referendum can only be put on a ballot in a county if school districts representing more than 50% of the students enrolled in public school in that county agree. We, by ourselves, meet that definition. Nobody in Winnebago County can do this without us, and we're the ones who are going to decide this. I've been quietly advocating for this for years because I know we've got these facilities needs. I know it can't come out of our operating budget. I know there's really a limited number of other places it's going to come from, none of which are very good alternatives. One of the reasons I like it is because for the same reasons, all the same reasons that the city has used to use its sales tax for its roads, for its facilities roads. So once upon a time, those of us who have been around a while, the city paid for all of its road improvements with bonds. Bonds are expensive because you pay interest on those bonds. And the city said, let's stop doing that. It makes absolutely no sense. Let's do a road tax, a road sales tax instead, and then we can use that money and we won't be paying interest on it. And they will tell you, I mean, if you've asked them, every time they rerun that sales tax referendum, they do tell you how much money they have saved in not having to pay interest.
Well, what are your thoughts on the possibility of running a successful referendum on that?
Well, I don't have any more crystal ball than anyone else. It depends on how well you message it to people. Like I said, more than half the counties in Illinois have passed this. We just recently passed a 50-cent mental health sales tax.
Right.
I think we've got the same arguments that the city has with the roads and the same justification. The other thing that I like about this is right now we don't get any sales tax revenue. People have a misconception about that. So whenever the city economic development that really is geared to bring in sales tax, we don't get any of that. We're totally dependent at this point on real estate taxes, mostly on real estate taxes, local real estate taxes, and state funding. So this would give us a third source of revenue, and it would give us some money. It's not going to take care of everything, but it would give us some money to start putting towards those facilities needs that we talked about at the committee of the whole meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that I don't know where else the money is going to come from. I don't know how successful we would be in getting a referendum passed.
So here's my question. The only other real place to get the money is to do bonds, which require a referendum. So we're either going to have a bond referendum or we're going to have to pass a sales tax referendum.
Yeah.
One of the
So timing-wise, Tim, and I'm with you. I think that we've talked about since they got the 0.5% mental health that we would probably no longer be successful going for a full percent, probably a half. We can have more conversation if people are even interested, but or the other board members are interested. But what is the timing on the next election cycle that this would go on because of COVID and job loss and everything else, even though this is on purchased goods because it's a sales tax. And so indeed it would affect anybody who comes from out of town as well. But, I think people are going to be pretty close on their pockets until the economy, until they have jobs. We can have the conversation, but then we'd have to have a timing conversation if it was a positive one. So what is the timing?
I don't know. I haven't done any of that research. I vaguely remember from the last time when we did actually dive into the weeds a little bit more. There is certainly a time frame for getting a referendum on the ballot. There's only certain ballots it can get on, obviously. And so we would, if we decided to go forward, we would have to do something like that. And then, we can't be involved in advocating for that. So the way this usually happens is if we're really interested in it, we think that it's a good idea. What actually happens is that somebody has to put together a committee of people who will actually advocate for it and run the referendum, and that costs money. So they have to raise money privately to do that. And that's the way that's done. So this isn't something that would happen like even at the next election. This is something that if we want it as a possibility, if we want to throw this in the mix as a funding source for these facilities needs that we have to start thinking about it because it is a long process.
One thing I think we could offer Mr. Rollins as a next step is Mrs. Yara works very closely with Ann Noble, and Ann can do a really good job of giving us some projections so we could put some numbers to what this would do. I would also add you did a wonderful job of outlining some of the benefits. One additional benefit, in many cases, you can do sort of a revenue swap where you pay and the city has certainly benefited from this with their strategy, as you highlighted before, which is over time, as you pay as you go through the sales tax, you can start the process of basically paying off bonds. About 66 cents of our tax rate right now. Maybe it's a little bit lower than that because of the increased values. Mrs. Yar can correct me on the specifics, but at least when we originally did the facilities work, 66 cents was devoted to paying off bonds. If those dollars largely fall off because of a shift to sales tax revenue, local property taxpayers could see a huge decrease over time in tax rates. A 66-cent jump would be very, very powerful. It would be double what the taxpayers got this year, which was a great jump because of about 6% in property value increases. So another benefit, and we would be happy to bring in Ann Noble, who does a wonderful job of providing the projections, could run the revenue numbers, and we could talk about some of those assumptions at a future meeting if the rest of the board is interested in that.
I think it'd be helpful.
I'd like to see it.
Yara, I spoke for you. I apologize. Is that something you'd be comfortable making the arrangement?
Sure, yeah. I've worked with her recently, and Tim and I have discussed some options with her when we were looking at the multi-year spending plan and some other items. So yeah, I can do that.
I think she does an excellent job of laying out assumptions and putting it out in a good way. And they helped us with our bonds during our last referendum campaign. The firm is Stiefel, and Ann does a really nice job with this work.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, Tim, anything else from the committee of the whole on your end?
I already kind of raised my hand on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at my paper, Mike.
That's right. So I have a couple questions. One is, what is the current rate, that is the sales tax rate, that anything we did would be added to?
I shouldn't do this off the top of my head, but I think we're up with the mental health sales tax. We're up to 8.5%.
8.75.
Well, see, yes, you did by heart.
Okay.
So yeah, because every time I tell somebody how much something is, they say, "What?" It's the tax. What?
Yeah.
It's
all right. So I want to be clear. I mean, if we're going to track and discuss this, then let's say, number one, it's 8.75. So if we wanted a half, what was it? Half dollar or something,
half cent.
Or half cent, what would that actually bring that up to?
9.25.
Well, that'd be a 9.25 then.
Yeah.
It would be. Well, that's what I thought. So my point would be then, so if it's 9.25, I mean, the one cautionary tale is, I mean, and that's presumably, does that have to be renewed, or does that automatically fold over from year to year? So unless you were to pass something against it, that would be in force.
So when we last discussed this, we discussed the concept of doing exactly what the city does, which is to include a 5-year sunset provision, so that every 5 years it would have to go back to the voters and be approved by the voters, so that you could show the voters we've used the money exactly how we said we were going to use it.
I see.
And that was just the concept that was discussed. I mean, the law doesn't require that,
right?
But the concept that we discussed last time was that. You know, some of those discussions about the sales tax, whether it's too high or not. Those are the same discussions that people had with the city when they passed the road tax, and then other surrounding counties started following suit. So one of the things that Ann Noble can do, and they have data, is they can show us what the sales tax is in various communities and counties throughout the state. One of the counties that has this 1% sales tax is Boone County. Boone County has this 1% sales tax. They passed it.
But they do not have a criminal justice.
They did not have a
tax, nor do they have a mental health tax either. But you are correct, Mr. Rollins. We can provide that information, and I think we should, so we can see how we compare. The other thing, as a reminder, while we do solely control the ability to bring this forward, I can tell you that in a previous iteration, this was very popular with other school districts, and the entire county would vote on this. So it would not be solely the taxpayers within the Rockford Public Schools boundary that would incur this increase. And also you would have a group of people larger than the Rockford Public Schools that could potentially support this. Last time we brought this forward, a lot of interest from those surrounding school districts at a preliminary meeting. And then we got some very negative reception from the local media on it, and we didn't take it very far. But I would anticipate, unless things have changed pretty dramatically, that there would be strong interest from other community school districts. But I think it would be important for us to at least bring the information to RPS first.
Okay.
So those other school districts each get, if they're in our county, so the portion of the tax that's collected that is in their school district, they get their percent half.
That's right.
Half as well. So it would
we all pay the tax, and we all receive a pro rata share of the tax, depending on our student population.
We get a very small check every year from Boone County because our district actually extends into Boone County.
Actually, every month I get to sign off for it. I think it was like $92. Okay. It was like $92 last month.
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. Anything else, Tim?
No. I think that's quite.
I'm going to go ahead and move the agenda then if there are no more questions. Mr. Siegel, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to raise any discussion you had on your topic areas under external stakeholders.
Yeah, this is where the meeting really picks up pace. The one item was pulled by administration, and the only new news to report is Earl and I do have a meeting scheduled with our lobbyists for next Tuesday morning. We do have a couple of things to talk about, as mentioned in the last meeting. But if anybody has any new ideas that they would really like to put in front of McGuire Woods, I have pen and paper.
There you go. Yeah, how about capital improvement funds?
That's top of the list.
Yeah, okay, so.
And second on the list was evidence-based funding.
Right.
Third was unfunded mandates.
Right.
So if any of those things can actually get tackled, I guess that would really be amazing. But unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen. But anyway, and I guess not only on what to discuss, if anyone has any style pointers they would like to throw at me, key ideas to bring up and ways to bring them up, I would be very interested in hearing those.
Okay. Thank you, David. All right. Well,
welcome.
We'll move through the rest of the agenda quickly here. And Mr. Jensen, you get a lot of extra credit for sticking with us this long. Thank you. I don't have anything from the governance committee to go over for, leftovers from the committee of the whole. Under announcements and report on action items, the board I'm on 9A now, the board policy for term of office. That is just an update of, who got into what sub-district by when, or, when they were filled or appointed or whatever. So you've reviewed that. Is there a motion and a second to approve this board revision policy?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, I have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the board policy revisions for board policy 2.50.
Mr. Scavano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Tanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we're now on to the consent portion of our meeting, which includes items previewed by the board committee chairs during the committee of the whole meeting. Under consent items number 10, for performance monitoring, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, the electronic message boards, the PDSA for third-party security renewal and upgrade, the PDSA for Tierney Smart Learning Suite software renewal, and the consent agenda items under planning and development, which included the Tier 1 PDSAs for Learning Ally, Music First, and Senior Semester through Rock Valley, the consent agenda items for Internal External Stakeholders Committee, which was pulled, and the governance consent items are the meeting minutes of October 27th, contract purchase orders, workers' compensation agreements for MB and LM, and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
I need a second.
Second.
A second by Mr. Rollins. Thank you. All right. I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the consent items.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
You didn't ask if any board members wish to pull any items.
There you go. Thank you. Are there any items on that list that board members want to have pulled for separate consideration?
I'll only want to give a very warm, fuzzy plug for 11A. So.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so now I'll have the coordinator call the roll.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Now we'll move on to 14, which is the closed session consent items, and we have the HR organizational report and addendum. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Ms. McCulloch. Don't think we have questions. Well, then, anybody want to pull that for further discussion? No, okay. If not, we'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the HR organizational report and addendum.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Abstain.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 abstain.
Okay, we are now on to our final action item, which is number 15, board member and administrative action steps. I just have 3 things written down. One is a reminder about the Chamber Education Outlook. If board members want to register for that, please let Laura Fromm know. That's Thursday, November 19th from 11:30 to 1. It's a virtual presentation by Dr. Jarrett. Also on November 30th, we are definitely having a 6 p.m. meeting to interview applicants for the board vacancy for Subdistrict A. And Laura has already sent out the draft questions to the board. If you look at your email, they're there already. And then when we have the final number of applicants, you will get all of their applications to review as well. That will be an in-person interview session on November 30th in the boardroom. And then for administration, the follow-up with Ann Noble, Michelle will do that regarding sales tax preliminary investigation. So any other items that I missed? Okay, if there are no other further comments or agenda items, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor.
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I pose same sign. We are adjourned at 9:27 p.m. Thank you all for your attention and your time.